This is part 7 of Federalist number 14. Let's look at the paragraph that starts with, "Let it be remarked in the third place that the intercourse throughout the Union will be facilitated by new improvements." Okay, we noticed, we talked about at the beginning of this Federalist that Madison is going to argue for 6 things. He talked about a republic and a republican form of government being different from a democracy. He talked about extended republic, how it will be best for us to unite under an extended republic and not to listen to people who say a republic is going to be small republic, small in size and homogeneous in population. Then he said that the national government, the federal government, will have enumerated powers. It will not have unlimited powers. It'll have its authority enumerated, named. It's going to be numbered. It's limited. And another thing that he's talking about here now, he says intercourse, but that they're talking about communication between the states, trade between the states, the movement of people between the states, things like that. Because he says, got to be realistic. We do have a big country, and right now most of our roads are dirt roads. Travel is either by a wagon or a carriage or just on a horse or a mule. So it's going to be really hard to get around. But he says if we unite, we can improve this communication. We can improve the roads. We can improve many things, and life will be much easier for us. Roads will everywhere be shortened and kept in better order. Accommodations for travelers will be multiplied and ameliorated. So you will have inns, I-N-N, places like little motels, hotels to stay. So it will make traveling much easier and less burdensome and tiring. And interior navigation on our eastern side will be open throughout and nearly throughout the whole extent of the 13 states. The communication between the western and the Atlantic districts and between parts of each will be rendered more and more easy by those numerous canals with which the beneficence of nature has intersected our country, and which art finds it so difficult, so little difficult to connect and compete. So he says, look, we've got this vast country, but gradually when we unite, we've got so many rivers in here. We're going to open ports, so navigation along on this side would be better, easier for ships to dock and go elsewhere. We're going to build canals because we've got lots of rivers, and we can, instead of carrying things on carts or wagons, we can just easily move them in canals, on ships in canals. If you're not familiar with, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen any of these old canals, you can find it on the internet easily. Look for canals, like one of the first canals that they made in New York, in state of New York. And it connected eastern part of New York from the Hudson River all the way close to where Niagara Falls is. So take a look at it. And those were some of the things that Madison is suggesting, that once we unite under this Constitution, we can do a lot of things, improving roads, building inns, hotels, make canals so that we can send our trade between states will be easy. Trades between our country and other countries will be easier. So he says this is another thing that union will give us. And then the next paragraph, he says, a fourth and still more important consideration is that as almost every state will on one side or other be a frontier and will thus find in a regard to its safety an inducement to make some sacrifices for the sake of general protection. So Madison himself says this is my fourth argument. Okay, I said he makes 6 arguments in this paper. The fourth argument, he is talking about look at our states. Every state that you see, there will have one part of it that will be vulnerable possibly to an attack. Whether it's the Native Americans that live on this side, or whether it's, they're vulnerable to attacks maybe by a navy from the other side, from the Atlantic. So either way, when we look at it, we have this in common, and that should bring us to this logic that should make it reasonable for us that it's just best for us to unite. And let me read the rest of the paragraph, and then I'll explain it to you. A fourth and still more important consideration is that as almost every state will on one side or other be a frontier and will thus find in a regard to its safety an inducement to make some sacrifices for the sake of general protection. So the states which lie at the greatest distance from the heart of the Union, and which, of course, may partake least of the ordinary circulation of its benefits, will be at the same time immediately contiguous to foreign nations and will consequently stand on particular occasions in greatest need of its strength and resource. And then he continues, it might be inconvenient for Georgia or the states forming our western and northeastern borders to send their representatives to the seat of the government. Seat of the government means the capital. Okay? But they would find it more so to struggle alone against an invading enemy, or even to support alone the whole expense of those precautions which may be dictated by the neighborhood of continual danger. If they should derive less benefit, therefore, from the Union in some respects than the less distant states, they will derive greater benefit from it in other respects. And thus the proper equilibrium will be maintained throughout. Okay, it's very interesting because he says, okay, we're uniting, and let's say the capital is going to be in Washington, D.C. Number one, all of our states are vulnerable to an attack by foreign nations. When he talks foreign nations, he means both European nations as well as the Native American tribes or nations. So he says that we will be exposed to them. They will attack us anytime. And he says, he uses the word contiguous, and I've mentioned this word before. When he says these nations contiguous to them means side by side, okay? Adjacent. That's why when I showed you this map of United States, I called it the contiguous 48 states, because these 48 states are attached side by side, attached to each other. They border each other. Whereas Alaska and Hawaii are not part of the contiguous state. So he says some of these states are contiguous with foreign nations. And one example, he gives a great example. He says state of Georgia. He says, okay, if our capital is all the way up here, it might be a little bit harder for Georgian representatives to travel up there compared to, let's say, somebody from Virginia or Pennsylvania. Because remember, they're still going with carts, carriages, and horses. There are no cars, nothing like that. So he says, yes, for somebody from Georgia to send a representative all the way up there, it's difficult. But look at it this way. If we unite, Georgia is surrounded here with Native American tribes. And none of them like Georgia. So what happens is at least Georgia will get support from us when we get attacked by those, when Georgia gets attacked by those tribes. So maybe they will make a sacrifice of maybe traveling 2 extra weeks to get to the capital, but they will have our support both militarily and financially. Because remember, he says states not only will have a small military if they don't unite, but also they'll have to spend a lot of money for that military to defend them. Whereas if it's a union, that expenditure, the amount you pay, is divided between states. So it won't cost the states that much. That's why of all the southern states, Georgia had slavery. So you would think it would join the union a little later, because they were wanting to make sure that in the federal constitution the right to own slaves is not going to be in danger. But because they had been attacked by Native American tribes here, they were one of the first few states that joined the union. They said, okay, we'll accept this constitution, because they knew it would give them support. So it's a give and take. When you enter a union, you might not think you're getting everything to your benefit, to your advantage, but in fact, when you add everything up, it is to one's advantage to be in a union, to stop thinking of war and armaments,